I'll be talking about how to advance your ultralight wheelchair skills, and I'll start out with talking about what are some resources online, written materials, community resources, so that you can work on wheelchair skills in an ultralight if that's something that interests you. And then after I talk about that, so coaching and resources, I'll be talking about basic building blocks that are important to be able to do before you go out and try and do wheelchair skills in a home setting or in a community setting. And I just want to especially thank Chris Garbaccio because he helped a lot with the content in this presentation, as well as Alan Gillen, who was a PT student who was here last year and did a lot of the filming of 3 different people doing these wheelchair video clips, which will be in this presentation. So with doing wheelies and doing wheelchair skills, I think from what I've experienced on inpatient rehab, part of the issue is learning opportunities. Rehab stays now are getting so short that it seems like people are focusing especially on doing basic transfers and caregiver training and trialing chairs. There's not a large volume of time to practice very many ultralight wheelchair skills while people are still here. And then sometimes when people go home, especially if you're going to an area where there's not a lot of therapists who are familiar with wheelchair skills, it can be just a matter of trial and error and not a lot of coaching or hands-on assistance with that. So that can be one issue, is just the learning opportunities. And then I think another aspect of it is just perceptions. A lot of times when I first am trying to help somebody learn how to do wheelies to be able to then go on and do ultralight wheelchair skills, people will say, I don't care about tricks right now, I just had this major tragedy in my life, I don't want to focus on doing stunts. Or it seems like wheelies are impossible, I'm just getting used to a chair, I don't want to do anything at risk where I'm going to put myself at risk for falling back and hitting my head or losing control of the chair. Or even it can sometimes seem overwhelming. People have said to imagine doing anything outside of the hospital. A lot of people don't even have a chance to stop by home until they've discharged. And so the idea of doing wheelchair skills is hard to even conceive of if you've never tried to go anywhere in a chair before. Or maybe even just thinking that if you're trying to go on these difficult terrains, some people have said, I'm going to always have somebody pushing my chair, so I don't need to learn how to do this on my own, because I don't ever want to do it on my own. So I think, at least during inpatient rehab, that can sometimes be some of the barriers and some of the risks, too, in terms of people wanting to go out and do these skills and being in pain and being afraid of falling. I think sometimes I've had people come back later and say that they wish that they learned the skills, but there were so many other things on their plate. And then it gets back to there being some issues with not enough learning opportunities. Some of the advantages, though, of learning wheelchair skills early on and over the long term is it helps with picking a chair. The more you're able to do and the more types of training you can go on, the more you know how the chair needs to fit you, what kinds of accessories you might want, what specs you want on your chair. So it can help you be more of an educated consumer when you're talking to therapists or to vendors or even trying to order something on your own. Trying to find a chair that's ideally set up for you to be able to do wheelies and these skills can help you really with picking a chair. And then different studies have found that being able to do basically advanced wheelchair skills helps with quality of life, helps you to be able to get in and out of a school setting more easily and independently, in and out of home, such as even if you're going to a friend's house for a picnic, being able to go through the grass to get to the backyard to spend time with your family and friends, getting in and out of a workplace, traveling. And then if wheelchair skills go well, it potentially can decrease issues with pain and falls. For example, if you're able to pop a wheelie to hop off of a curb in an intersection, you can see which direction traffic is coming from and can have more control of the chair and less issues with tipping the chair over backwards compared to if you do more of a basic back down a curb method where you're not seeing oncoming traffic, and if the curb's really steep, you can have less control of the chair if you're hopping the curb, not in a wheelie. And some of the resources that are available, one would just be other wheelchair users. So coming to these forums and asking people questions, what do they know how to do, how did they learn, what tips do they have, and coming to the spinal cord injury support group or the wellness transition programs here and at the University of Washington. There's a website that's listed at the end here. It's part of Dalhousie University's Wheelchair Skills Training Program, and they have a website. It's, I think, mostly therapy students demonstrating the skills as opposed to full-time wheelchair users, but they can give you a gist of how to do quite a few different skills and different techniques on their wheelchair circuit course. And then there's the Manual Wheelchair Training Guide. I think it's put out by the Veterans Association, but you can find it oftentimes online on online book selling companies. Usually the price ranges day to day, so keep your eyes open. If it looks expensive one day, you can often find that book, and it has a lot of really helpful resources for using a wheelchair on snow, ice, railroad tracks, a lot of different terrains, and there's another version of it that's for power chair users as well. And they have helpful sketches, and they also have some tips of how to direct somebody. So if you're just learning how to do a skill and you want a family member to be assisting you, or you even anticipate needing to direct a stranger how to help you, they can give you ideas on where to tell a person to hold on to the frame of your chair or leg rest, or not to hold on to the leg rest, and things like that. And then for coaching, again, trying to see if there's any therapists who can help you out, or other wheelchair users can help with that. With coaching, one of the key things at first, as you're working on getting your balance, is the issue of having somebody spot you. With a lot of chairs have a spreader bar or a bar on the back of the backrest that you could attach a strap. Sometimes people will use a gate belt, and with that, it allows somebody to stand really close behind you, hold onto the strap, and keep the chair from flipping over backwards as you're learning to do a wheelie. And especially therapists can do that, but sometimes they can train family members or friends how to help spot you in that manner as you're learning these skills. And I think too, people will be giving you tips, but see how much you can self-analyze. For example, if you have a smartphone or a camera where you can have videotapes of what you're doing and then go back and watch it and see what things caused you to struggle more than others, see where your hand placements were, where you were leaning your head, so different things to do with your body position or your wheelchair setup. Are you having to reach really far back? Are your wheels seeming to be really far out to the side? Do you notice the front small wheels, the casters getting caught on things? And or you can do some skills in front of a mirror. So if you're just learning how to find your balance point to do a wheelie in place, if you're facing a mirror or have a mirror on your side, notice things, again, like where is your hands positioned, where are you leaning with your torso, how high off of the ground do your front wheels need to be at your balance point, and are you tending to tip too far back or forward, and looking at it that way. So we'll talk about a few foundational skills that would be the minimum that you should have down before you go and try these other skills. And first one would just be a stationary wheelie. And studies have found, actually, if you go and do it on an uneven surface, like if you go and do it out on the lawn or thick carpet, the chair doesn't wiggle around as much, so it's a little bit less challenging to do a wheelie in those settings, and a lot of times people don't feel quite as nervous doing wheelies there. And then two, a lot of times if you have somebody put you back into your balance point so you can feel how far back it is, that can be advantageous because usually your balance point is a lot further back than you might expect. And then have them spot you as you're at that balance point and let you practice grasping your wheels and bringing them forward and backwards to learn where that balance point is. And if you get a new chair, or if you have a backpack on your chair or something in your lap, or change the configurations on your chair, that balance point is going to change. So that can be a good time to even just do a quick refresher when you're using a new chair. And then two, have somebody bring you back a little bit too far where you're starting to lose your balance backward in a controlled environment, and practice moving your hands in a way that you can bring yourself forward and back around your balance point. Because you want it to be so automatic that you're not thinking, oh no, do I pull back, do I push forward? You just want to know instantly what you need to do so that if you're truly losing your balance, you can self-correct quickly. And then two, you don't need to just practice going into a full wheelie. It's good to practice going into a partial wheelie where you're popping up but not always all the way to your balance point, because doing that helps you go over a lot of different obstacles, like going over a small threshold or a hose on the sidewalk or roots or a small pothole, and being able to time a pop-up so that you can go up a curb. And so you can practice doing that pop-up in place, a full wheelie in place. And then as far as safe falls go, there's not, when I was looking at different research articles, it didn't seem like there's a clear-cut ideal way to prepare yourself for a safe fall, which makes sense. But one issue is shielding your head so that you're not banging your head against something as you land. So sometimes people will say you should cradle your head and let the chair hit the ground, whether you're falling sideways or falling backwards. But then the issue is if you're only holding onto your head, sometimes your knee, if you don't have control of where your legs are going, then your knees can hit you in the face. So there's not an ideal, but you're basically trying to keep your head as far forward as you can off of the ground so the frame hits the ground first, and then doing some combination of blocking your knees and blocking your head, or blocking your head with both of your arms. Let's see here. And then once you're starting to feel comfortable with doing a stationary wheelie, another skill to work on would be a dynamic wheelie. So that means going forward in a wheelie, across the ground, going backwards, turning like going in a slalom, as well as pivoting in place. And sometimes there's a couple different ways to pivot in place. One would be pulling back with one hand as you pull forward with the other hand, or you can keep the one hand still and do small pushes with the other hand. And then slalom forward is important. For example, if you're going on an uneven surface, I'll be talking about this later, but you might have obstacles. You might have people coming at you as you're going across the grass of the park and need to go around them. And so it gives you a little bit more freedom on where you go if you can do slalom. And then reverse is the most difficult, because every time you're trying to propel the chair backwards and reverse in a wheelie, you're pulling yourself out of a wheelie, because pulling back brings your chair and body forward. So it can be frustrating because you can go back fine, but you're not able to maintain the wheelie as you go. So those skills allow you to do a lot of indoor skills as well as outdoor skills. And doing the little pop-ups, like I mentioned, help a lot with thresholds. And that can even be going from tile to a throw rug. So any small change in surface height. And then two, if you have a sunken living room or other sunken rooms where there's a step, being able to do a pop-up helps you to be able to go up curbs. And this would be an example of a kind of an indoor curb. And I'll talk about that later. And then, like I said, if you're able to pop up in a wheelie, you can hop up onto a thicker carpet like a throw rug. If it's so thick that you're really struggling with propelling forward, sometimes you can even stay in a wheelie as you go across thick carpet. And then as far as tight spaces go, like in an elevator or tight restrooms, if you're able to pop in a wheelie and do a pivot in place in the wheelie, it can decrease your turning radius, so allow you to have a little bit more accessibility in those settings. If you're still struggling with that, you can also try backing in as opposed to going in forward. And then there's also no hands wheelie. There's a couple different ways to do this. The idea with a no hand wheelie is that you can lean back against a surface, whether it's a sturdy table or a wall, and have your brakes on your chair and not have to be balancing your chair. It's already in the balance point, leaned against the surface. So one way that you can do it is if you're backed up against a table, come forward a foot or two. It depends on your height and the size of your chair and the height of the surface. But you're coming a little bit forward, you're locking your brakes, and then reaching back to the surface and pulling your chair back until your backrest is resting against the surface and you're at a balance point. And then another way to do it is if you're able to go in a wheelie backwards until you bump up against a wall or a sturdy cupboard, then balancing, putting your brakes on, and leaning against the backrest is another way to do that. And it's a partial pressure relief. It takes some of the pressure off of your bottom. It can also help rest your back. So if you have some issues with not being able to stay up in your chair a long time because it's not comfortable sitting bolt upright all the time, it's one option for changing your position a little bit. And two, if you're feeling like you're always looking up at people and want to even rest your head back against the wall while you're talking to somebody or even talking on the phone, reading a book, that's an option. And then another environment inside is escalators. Some places will ask you to not go on an escalator because they're afraid you'll get stuck in the escalator. So I don't know how many places you can try it, but one issue to consider is the timing. So not only the timing of where your chair is hitting on the steps and when you're entering the escalator and exiting the escalator as far as your balance goes, but also the timing of the rails. I was talking to one man who said he was going up and one handrail went faster than the other. So he was going up and trying to keep himself balanced, and the one rail was going like this, and so it wedged him sideways. So even just checking real quick as you're beginning to go up, do you need to go up a little bit faster with one hand to the other, and seeing if there's someone around who can pause the elevator or the escalator can be an issue. And two, just knowing which way you should lean. So You should go up and you should go down the escalator facing up the escalator. You don't want to be going down the escalator face down and pitch forward out of your chair, but it can be scary to go down as well. So this is something I think too. There's liability and risk issues with all these, but this one can have, it can cause a lot of problems if you're stuck at an angle. And then stairs. I think stairs is one of the most physically demanding things. It's not just about balance, which most of these are about balance and technique. Stairs, especially going up, takes a tremendous amount of arm strength as well as balance. And it can go really wrong, especially if you're up a couple steps and you fall down the stairs and hit your head. And even if it goes smoothly, it's a lot of wear and tear on your arms, especially your shoulders, pulling your whole body weight up and down stairs. So there are different ways to do it to make it a little less dangerous, and I've had some people say that they wish that they at least had some tips on how to do this in case you're in a building and there's a fire and the escalator goes and there's nobody to help carry you downstairs, or if you're getting off of a train and the elevator and escalators aren't working. Every now and then I've had people say they wish they had some ideas. So there's different ways online that people show good and bad ways how to do this, but I definitely, if you have somebody who's trained and has done them before, I'd have them help you out, just again because the risks are so high. And another option with that too is learning how to transfer from the chair to the ground and then scooting up and down steps, sitting on the step, as opposed to trying to go down the stairs or up the stairs in the chair. And then, so for uneven terrain, a lot of areas, including Seattle, have at least some places where there's going to be a lot of gravel even on the sidewalk. But even if you're going to a friend's house and they haven't paved their driveway, if you're going on vacation, you're trying to go to a sandy beach or go camping, there's going to be a lot of surfaces where if you just propel regular and not in a wheelie, you might run into issues with the front small casters getting snagged on everything, which could be pretty demanding or cause you to just get totally stuck. Even if you do go in a wheelie, some of these surfaces, especially like sand, can get into your chair and gum it up or damage it. So sometimes people will have a second chair, or they'll even rent a chair when they're going to the beach. And there are different websites, especially ones related to recreational therapy, where they talk about local resources of where you could rent a chair, for example, if you're in an area where it's beach and you can use one of their own chairs instead of damaging yours. But if you are needing to go on grass or things like that, going on uneven terrain is basically like just doing a dynamic wheelie. So you're popping into a wheelie and you're keeping the front wheels up and you can propel forward, backwards, and side to side. It's more demanding in terms of, physically it's hard. It's like mountain biking on over routes and things like that. There's just a lot more friction and a lot more to push against, even whether you have narrow wheels or wide tires. There's a lot to push against, but in other ways it can be a little easier to balance because you're going a little bit slower and the friction keeps the chair from tipping in and out of the wheelie quite as much. And then depression, so that would be going over grates, going over potholes and different holes. And sometimes if you pop into a wheelie, your casters are up out of the pothole or out of the grate, and you can go across on your rear wheels and you don't really have to hop over anything. If the hole or grate is narrow enough, you just straddle it with the rear wheels. So that'd be basically like doing a dynamic wheelie again. If the surface or the hole or pothole is really wide, sometimes you're popping up so that your casters don't get caught, but then you're having to, as you enter down into the dip, having to ascend and get enough momentum to be able to pop back up out of the hole. So it's almost like having to go up a curb. And then with grates, one issue is being able to pop over it, but another issue too is what if your caster does get stuck. So one thing that you could practice with potholes and grates is even intentionally getting stuck in them and practicing rocking your chair side to side and doing a combination of that. Also with popping up into a wheelie and seeing if you can free yourself in a less stressful situation so that you have some of those techniques down later and figure out how much you can lean side to side and pull side to side without tipping your chair over. And then raised obstacles. So I was talking about depressions and then something above ground that's getting you stuck. So that could be tree roots, cracks in, like even large cracks in the sidewalk, hoses. And so a lot of times with that, if it's a small enough obstacle or even railroad tracks, you're popping up the front wheels again over the obstacle and then getting enough momentum and strength to push the rear wheels over the obstacle. And you could start with small ones, even just setting up something on your back patio and practicing hopping over that to get used to those surfaces. And then for hills and ramps, I put off trying to learn how to go down a ramp in a wheelie because it seemed a lot more stressful and scary compared to these other techniques. But actually, it's a little bit easier going down a ramp in a wheelie once you're popped up and found your balance point, because you're basically leaning back and braking, letting the rims go through your hands. When you're going forward in a wheelie or doing a wheelie in place, sometimes you have to do a lot more back and forth adjusting to keep your balance point. Whereas if you're leaning back to go down a hill, sometimes it's easier to find that balance point, hang out there, and just keep yourself from going down too fast. The point of going down a hill and a ramp in a wheelie, as opposed to just zipping right down regular, is you can control your speed a little bit better. So especially if you're in a crowded area and you don't want to run into a pedestrian with your chair, or you're trying to balance something on your lap that you don't want to spill out, it keeps your chair back and it keeps you going a little bit slower and more in control. But two, it can help keep the casters again up off the ground where they snag things. So if the hill itself is really steep, it keeps you from pitching over as you go down. Or if the hill is steep but you're going to a level, it keeps you from catching those front wheels as you make it to the bottom of the hill and go to the leveled off spot, so you're not falling forward out of the chair. And if it's exhausting to go up hills, even if you bring somebody along, to have them just push you up the hill a couple times so you get a lot of reps in and get used to seeing how far you can lean back on those ramps or hills, it can actually be a lot easier than it looks. And then for going up the hills, talk to your therapist or vendors or whoever's helping you order a chair. If you're feeling like no matter how hard you try to practice going up the hills, you don't have enough balance or momentum and you can't stay forward enough to go up and down in your chair, make sure it's not just a matter of how your chair is configured. There can be different ways to adjust the rear wheel position, or even talk about the types of tires or your sitting balance. So sometimes you can alter the chair itself. Sometimes you can do smaller changes to the chair, like getting Grates or hill climbers that help you from sliding back between each push when you're going up a hill. More expensive options could be like magic wheels or other types, so that would be like a mechanical assist or other power assist options. Those do add a lot to the chair, and sometimes insurance doesn't pay for some of those options. And then power chair is another option, especially if you're finding that your shoulders are becoming more and more painful and you're getting stuck to where it's harder to do a lot of different wheelchair skills you used to be able to do. So bring that up with your therapist if you're consistently finding you have difficulty in certain environments with your wheelchair skills, to see if there's any ways to change your technique or the setup of the chair, your positioning, or things like that. For descending a hill and a ramp, again, a concern is sitting balance. So going up and going down, you're looking at how much you need to lean forward and how much you need to lean back. And think, at least a lot of times when I've had people just start to learn how to do different wheelies and hills and things like that, they really want to be cinched down into the chair and have a tight chest strap and a really huge backrest. But see if there's ways to learn these techniques without having to depend on those. One, because a really tall, large backrest adds a lot of weight to the chair, and it doesn't allow you to necessarily use all of your torso muscles, and it can influence your posture. So if you can work towards getting as small of a backrest as you can, that'll help you with your overall skills and the weight of your chair. And two, then with the chest strap, even if it gives you some stability on the levels, if you're always cinched down into the backrest with the chest strap, you can't lean forward and back enough against the backrest to keep your balance on a lot of the skills that I've been talking about. So see if there's something, again, that you can change with your balance point or your chair setup so that you don't have to depend on that and then be restricted as you're trying to do some of these skills later. And then for curbs, going up a curb involves doing a pop-up, and part of going up a curb is knowing how high to do the pop-up and also coordinating when to do the pop-up. A lot of times people will do it a little bit too soon or a little bit too late and then catch the feet or the casters on the front of the curb and slam to a stop or get the foot plate stuck on the top of the curb. So even at first, if you want, you can even just practice going up to the curb, not even worrying about going up it itself, but just practice popping up and see how high you have to get the casters up, and take some of the anxiety out of it too. and then practice with starting from a further and further distance back and a greater speed, and getting used to when you need to do the pop-up. If somebody's spotting you with this, it's a good idea to have them hold not only onto a belt or something like that behind the chair, but if you have any trouble with your sitting balance, have them keep a hand in front of your shoulder so that if you hit the curb really hard, you're not flying forward out of the chair or falling forward in the chair, but you're having somebody give you a little bit of stability for that. And you can try out different heights of curbs, and two, if it's causing you a lot of pain hitting the curb over and over, I've even just used something softer like a firm foam or that kind of thing until people get that down, and then moving to a real cement curb or wood curb, because it's not as loud, it doesn't throw you off as much, it doesn't hurt quite as much. Helps you get down the timing and the coordination of things. And then two, if you can, get used to controlling your chair in terms of wheelies all with your arms, because if you're depending heavily on your head position and leaning your head forward and back or your torso forward and back, once you get to doing a curb, you have to be able to lean back and then lean forward so that you get enough forward momentum and you don't tip the chair over backwards. So you want to not have to worry about where your head is at to maintain your wheelies before you want to have that down before you start to try to do curbs. And then for going down, initially it's usually easier to back down a curb, especially if it's not too steep, and maintain control of the chair. But there can be a lot of shock and vibration that goes through your chair, which can cause some pain if you're always backing down a curb, compared to if you're able to hop off a curb forward in a wheelie and just land on those rear wheels, which have spokes and are usually air-filled and can take a lot of that shock instead of your body having to absorb all of it. And two, like I mentioned earlier, it does give you a lot more visibility if you're able to hop off a curb forward and see who's about to step into your path, or see if you're hitting it right and landing the curb correctly, and control the speed of your chair. So as far as moving forward goes, I think there are so many different good resources online. The Wheelchair Skills program, and CareCure, which is an online forum through Rutgers, is an excellent online forum. So far it's the largest forum that I've been able to find, made up of mostly people with spinal cord injuries. It's not a therapist network or that kind of thing. It's people talking about what types of chairs they like, which vendors they like, what components break, what ideas for travel, where do they get a chair to go to the beach. But all different resources, and you can post your own discussion threads and ask people for tips to learn the skills that you're trying to work on. And then also, I just encourage you to think of your skills. Are there a few skills that you feel like you're just so close to being able to do, and you were wondering if there's anything you could do to change the setup of your chair, or how somebody's spotting you, or even have a chance to have somebody videotape you, and so that you can see what's making it difficult for you, and so you can get those skills down. And then for yourself, or as you talk to other wheelchair users or therapists, talking about what are some things that you could be shooting for and working towards, and what are some of the building blocks that you can practice on your own or at therapy setting in order to get closer to being able to do those skills. And we actually have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions or comments from people in the audience. So the comment was, if you're struggling with going up or down a hill, straight up or straight down, traversing, so going more at an angle so that you can tackle it basically with switchbacks, can give you more control of the chair and allow you to do it more independently. So the comment was, if you're wanting to practice wheelies more on your own and you don't have somebody to spot you, or you don't want somebody to spot you, another option is to go to a surface such as a couch or another firm surface that you can back up against that'll keep you from falling back, and as you get more and more balanced, then start to come away from that surface and maintain your balance with something soft nearby or a mat nearby. So one option for going down a curb would be to back down a curb, which involves leaning really far forward so the chair doesn't flip over backwards, and basically breaking or grasping the rims to slow the chair as it goes backwards off the curb. So you're still hitting the ground with the rear wheels, but then as you come back, if the curb's very steep, you could flip the whole chair over backwards as you land, and two, as you're backing up, the casters sometimes can slam pretty hard on the ground. The second option, which can take some more balance, or it requires that you could do a wheelie, would be going forward off of a curb, but before you go off the curb, first popping up into a wheelie, which I think I didn't mention that. So popping up into a wheelie and then going forward in a wheelie and landing off of the curb just on the rear wheels. and then bringing the front wheels back down to the ground. So the comment was if you're going over a long distance of uneven surfaces like grass, having other options that you can mount on your chair. If you're going to be doing a lot, see if there's other options such as freewheel or other types of equipment that you can mount that makes your wheelchair basically base of support longer, or some of them can be more like a three-wheel setup where you have the big rear wheels and then something mounted far out front. And that can be less strain on your shoulders.